I hope you had enough time to read through everything, and thank you so much for turning up. This is the first one for us, so we're a bit nervous, and we hope we still manage to record this in a way that is like not too boring to listen to. As said before, if you have any questions afterwards, I hope there will be a Q&A. I'm not entirely sure at the moment, but hopefully there will be time afterwards to ask questions. But I will also probably be around in the breaks, to catch up with me or us. Yes, so I thought we start with a bit about our life before we became aware that we are a system. So we started to have memories about sexual abuse at 25, and then for quite a while it was a wild ride, because it was like, oh my god, there's more, oh my god, there's more, and again we were like, I think we know everything now, it can't get any worse, this is it, only to find out there was more. And we worked through quite a few layers of abuse at home. And it was just not really, we were not really coming to an end. And that took a few years of figuring things out, how to live with trauma, doing quite a lot of general trauma therapy around memory recovery. We've always had quite a vivid imagination, which later turned out is our inner world. But at that point we didn't know. So therapists were quite often like, oh my god, I just always went in and rescued parts, and without knowing what I was actually doing. And a big part of our life has always been sport or massaging, holistic stuff, looking into natural things, natural remedies, Reiki, spiritual healing, shamanism. So we used a lot of those tools in those early years when we started to find out that there even was trauma. And as we discovered more and more of our story, we always wondered why we don't have DID. That was always a really, really big question for us, because we'd been in a trauma clinic and met quite a few people with DID, and surprise, surprise, we really connected well with everyone who had DID, especially with the younger parts of other people. We felt quite at home. But there was always a question, why don't we have DID? By now we have discovered a lot of trauma, and the understanding we had back then was like, it could potentially be that, we would have DID, but in our mind we never lost time, and back then there wasn't much internet, and the things that we knew about DID were like, well, there need to be different people, there need to be loss of time and confusion about where you are and who you are, finding things that don't belong to you, and all that kind of stuff didn't really happen to us. What we found out later was that we have parts or insiders that were programmed to fill the gaps. So we had gaps, we just didn't realize it until much, much later, when someone said, it's my job to actually fill those gaps. So we fill them with everyday life, so you don't even notice. At that point, obviously, we already had quite a lot of awareness. That information was given to us, like, quite a way into system awareness. But yeah, so we never we'd never ticked the boxes, I think, until much, much later, when there was more knowing and understanding of what's actually happening. So what happened for us was, without having much of an understanding what our life actually was like, we felt very drawn to a lot of modalities that later on would help us on the healing journey, on our own healing journey, and those are the modalities we've then trained in, and that we now use as therapists with our clients as well. But first we started off as a holistic therapist, did a lot of massage, reflexology, Reiki, that kind of stuff. Became a yoga teacher, but we always felt like there's something missing. We always felt like we wanted to do more. We wanted to work more with the things that are underlying the issues, rather than, someone comes and goes, can you massage my feet? Which, I love all those therapies, but we really wanted to do more. But we felt like, well, who are we to think we know anything? We could be possibly good at anything. So there was a lot of resistance to stepping into looking for different training modalities that equip us better for the work with trauma. But what we did train in RMTI, and I'm going to come to that later on a little bit more about the different modalities that I do, EFT, brain gym, and we came across something by pure chance. It worked for us, and then we started training in it. So everything that we do offer nowadays, the toolbox we have, is based on things that we experienced first on our own journey. Which I think is really, really important for therapists, to not just learn something, but to really know a modality inside out. How does it feel to be on the receiving end of brain spotting, of, whatever you do. And know how hard it can be, but also have the experience of the outcome of like, yes, this is really, really hard and scary, but if I stick to it, there will be change, And I know for many who might be listening, they might feel like, yeah, that's not how things work for us. I get that. We all really get that. We had a lot of times where it got all very, very dark, and where we didn't see a way through. Certainly not a way out. Where we were in shock a lot over the things that were coming up. And I want to say this as well, because I think not many people, or not many, no, that's not true, but a lot of people do not have the luxury of finding good therapists who have an understanding of what's going on, and are not afraid to go alongside you. So we have been very lucky in one, that we could afford it, and that we found the right people. So I don't want to take that away and say like this is all easy, like everyone has access to this. This is not, unfortunately, how things are in the world. Again, looking back, we find there was wisdom within our system. And again, we only understood that a lot later. But somehow our insiders were sort of like plotting in the back, without like the front person. Oh God, she didn't have a clue. She absolutely didn't have a clue. She always felt like, no, oh gosh, I think we know enough. We can just get on with life a bit and settle and, enjoy life and move on from the past and all that. While in the background, insiders were very, very busy to sort of like push her in this direction and then in that direction, and look here, look there. So, but we didn't have a clue. She didn't have a clue. But that made it possible that we chose therapies for ourselves, as well as those things that we then trained in, that would really help us later on in our journey. Like, for example, massaging, we've always massaged. We also know there was a reason why we were good at massaging, but okay, I'm not gonna go into this now. But when you do training as a massage therapist, you receive a lot of massage as well, and it was really, in that setting, it was safe. And that gave us memories, body memories, embodied experiences that were real in a safe environment, and that felt good. Yes, it also brought stuff up, but it really helped us later on to remember that the body already had that experience as well. And that happened with a lot of other things. So looking back, there's like, it's almost like a what's the word? Someone has done the screenwriting in the background, and we just followed. And it's not just. When I use just a lot, but it's not. Nothing of this is just. I know that. Yeah. Something else that we also noticed afterwards, and only understood afterwards, was that from very early on we seemed to have introjects of therapists or people who were really supporting us. And that wasn't just so that we would have the support inside when we weren't with people who were helpful, but also for the therapist parts now who come together when we see clients. They can draw from all the introjects that we have from therapists, and they sort of like get information, and we sort of like they were also almost like note taking of like, oh, this works really well, this is really helpful, oh my god, we don't like this, that was really crap. And I think we learned a lot from having these little therapist people sitting all around us in the background, watching our therapists and learning. So we haven't just done the actual trainings, which obviously are all, have been very, very good. We've been very lucky with our teachers there. We've always been very open about having DID, so we were able to ask quite specific questions, because most trainings, to be honest, are not geared for dissociation. They're quite often not even geared for like a bit more extreme trauma. So, it really helped us to have those little therapist parts, and still helps us when we work, to just remind us of what we found helpful. So all in all, we draw not just from our lived experience of the actual trauma, but also from the lived experience of working things through, the meeting of our parts and insiders. We've got a chronic autoimmune illness, so we draw from that experience what's worked and how different things can present themselves within the body. And our parts come either with stories, with visuals, they can come with emotions, or body flashbacks, and sometimes it's just a knowing. So we draw from all of that lived experience, but also from how it feels to receive therapy, how to train and have the actual understanding and academic knowledge and wisdom about the different modalities. But we're also drawing from a vast amount of peer support. From very early on, we joined Facebook groups and found those extremely helpful. And then lately, the last bit over 2 years now, I think, we've been part of peer support groups, like unfacilitated and facilitated peer support groups, mostly specifically for organized extreme abuse. So we draw also from all the other experiences that have been shared. We've listened, we've supported, we have been supported. Yeah, that's been a huge milestone of our own healing journey. So it's not just the therapy and what's happening there, but also the things that we experienced in the community with other survivors. That has been like really important. And I think the message we want to pass on to others really is as well, we have the experience of getting through, like of breaking free from the past, breaking free from a lot of connections with people, which was very painful, but very, very necessary. And now we're in the process of creating our lives the way we want it, and how we want to live. There's still a lot of stuff coming up, and I think there always will be, but it's on our terms a lot more of the time, and things have certainly changed, like massively changed. So what we found was that therapy was extremely hard. We dove right in. We didn't really leave anything to denial or something. We skipped that bit completely and just got, okay, let's do processing. Whoever comes is welcome. And it was a really, really important part of our healing journey, and still is. But what was equally as important was a peer support, because therapy can be quite lonely, especially if you have a therapist who hasn't got lived experience, I think. I mean, it was really good for us, ours hasn't. And she tried to understand where we're coming from and what our experiences are like. But I think if you haven't experienced these things, you can only go so far in a way. And for us that was really good and helpful, because it was a reminder of, yes, there are people who don't have these experiences, and they still want to look at people like us. They still want to work with people like us. There's good people out there, because I find, like, when you go into this, it can easily go into everyone is a bad person, or who can we actually trust. So that was really good to have a therapist for us who hasn't got lived experience. But it also was lonely. And then once we met the community, it just opened up a different way of healing. It opened up the me too a lot of the time. We would listen to others and go like, oh my god, shit, did we experience that or not? And for a long time we were like, are we just having memories because we've heard something or we've read something from other people? And we found that's not the case. We found it was very clearly some things we have heard many, many, many times, and we know that's not what's happened to us. So there is a very distinct difference of my own memories and those from others. So the most important thing for us from peer support was to meet other people, see how they work things through, because we all are so unique. Every system is so unique, so we need to do things very differently. What happened in both spaces, like in the therapy space with therapists, but also in the peer support, was that we were seen as equal and competent in my own healing or our healing. We felt respected, and we felt witnessed and heard. We were believed, which is, like, I think, almost one of the most important things. But also we could laugh with others, not just within the community. We usually have therapists who are having a really good sense of humor as well, and I think that's really important, because you can't look at this darkness and not hold on to some way of laughing about it all, because it is otherwise just too hard, really. So and I'm not saying, like, as in laughing as like taking the mickey of it, or not taking it seriously. It's laughing despite all the things that have happened. And I think what helped us the most was being seen as a whole and not as broken. a lot of our therapists, whatever we presented, whoever turned up, would still see us as, as who we are all together, and believe that we can get through. And that was really important. So how did it all start that we became aware? Well, for us, it happened overnight. We went to sleep, and the next morning we were a man in a woman's body, and thinking like, what the actual fuck? Sorry for the swear. Where it was like, oh my god. And then the next one was like, oh crap, we've got DID. And then the body got up to the bathroom, looked in the mirror and thought like, oh gosh, this is really not right. And then from then on, that main host or frontier or whatever you want to call the person who lived life up to then was gone. And we've got an inner healing space from our Reiki and shamanic work, and that's where she was, and that's where she still is. And that's where parts who've done the work for us usually go, where they rest. Some fuse or integrate in different ways, but usually, they're done. They're just, they've done their bit, they've held what they needed to hold, and then once we've done the work, quite often they can just rest, really, and heal. So she was gone, but we didn't understand that back then. And parts kept popping up like crazy. So we just we discovered so many parts in the first 2 weeks. It was just like bang, 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 bang. People were turning up and saying, oh, hi, this is me. Oh, hi, this is me. There was no sense of who I am. It was like a constant change of parts and people. It was very difficult to dress and do anything, really. There was a lot of amnesia then. And it was really hard. There was a lot of rapid switching. And at the beginning, it was more like people turning up so we could get to know them. And then after a while, they started to show us a little bit more about their story or their life. And that's when things began to be really, really difficult. So we always had done sport. We always, done holistic stuff, Reiki, and nothing worked anymore. We totally collapsed. And that was really, really hard. So we lost all our tools. Because everything was triggering. So as soon as we connected with the body, it got triggered. Someone stepped into the body and said like, oh, I've got a memory. Oh, this is this. But they were like really tiny fragments, and it was really difficult to put things together and into places, and we didn't have enough understanding of what our story even was or what to even Google. I mean, we knew we had extreme abuse and organized abuse, but we didn't quite understand how organized that all was. And I'm just noticing there's someone going like, okay, that's enough of that now. That's not, let's not go there. So, I'm respecting everyone's feelings about safety here. Sorry, just a moment. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a sec. Yeah, sorry for that. So we got to a place where functioning was really, really difficult. Everyday life became a total mess, and quite unpredictable. And our therapist back then was very good, but she didn't have enough understanding of programming or the kind of abuse or even DID that we were discovering. The safest place for us was sort of like in bed, if I don't move and just ignore that I have a body, then I can't harm the body and nothing bad can happen. And that worked to a degree, but on the other hand, it also left us stranded with what was coming up in our mind. So even though we didn't move, then obviously we had a lot of visual stuff coming up. So it wasn't like really the ideal situation. And eventually we decided to go in a trauma clinic that specialized in somatic therapies. So there was like, and there was IFS, there was somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, polyvagal, but they also had yoga and Tai Chi. And the best thing for us was they had an understanding of manufactured DID, polyfragmentation, programming, all that kind of stuff. And that was the first time that we actually met therapists who knew more than us about this kind of stuff. And that was a game changer. That was like when things started to open up massively. So once we were in a safe space, things started to get a lot worse. I feel like we had one where we met this one therapist that wasn't even our therapist, and one of my insiders was like, that's the one, we need to work with her. So we requested that, and we got that through, luckily, and started working for like 3 months or so with this therapist. And yeah, our parts really took us out big time. So there was a lot of dissociation, where we couldn't move, we couldn't speak. We had awareness about like everything that was going on around us, but we just couldn't do anything. So sometimes we would lie in our room on the floor and not be able to move for an hour or so. Then eventually make our way downstairs and ask for help. And then it was a very intense time. We had a lot of so what happened in the body was like, other than having visual flashbacks, we had a lot of body flashbacks, which for us was in the beginning didn't really make sense what was coming up. So there were what's it called? Flashbacks of like actual memories that we couldn't quite make sense of in the beginning until things started to fall, together a bit more. And we also had but shaking and tremors as a release of the actual trauma that is held in the body. That was not so specific to a certain memory. But the body would do very strange things as it remembered what had happened to us. There was a lot of pain. As I say, there were flares of our autoimmune illness. It was a hard time, and quite often we weren't able to snap out of the dissociation on our own. So we needed another safe nervous system to come and be with us and help us or guide us back into the here and now. And that was only possible with certain therapists, really. If it was the wrong therapist, my parts were like, no, I'm not going to do this, we're just going to stay here forever. While others were like, can we just move, please? Can we just talk? And yeah, no, they were not having it. Until the right therapist came. Luckily we have a lot more control about that nowadays. We rarely dissociate. Certainly not in that way. We zone out a bit and stuff like that, but it's not so much more in the way that we are totally helpless and can't move or speak. What happens nowadays is like when we have memories come up, they are always very, very physical, which is really, really hard. But usually nowadays we get a lot of information straight away as well, or relatively quickly. So it's not as nothing is as fragmented anymore. It used to be like in tiny fragments. So with polyfragmentation, things don't really come with like one part holds all of this and one part holds all of that. We have like armies of fear, armies of pain, armies of whatever, a certain aspect of a memory. And then when we get flooded, we get flooded. There is like still, it can still get very, very intense. But it is a lot better. And we can make deals nowadays where we say like, okay, we have therapy on this day, we work these days, can we please hold back? And that seems to work relatively well at the moment. So touch wood, I hope that stays that way for now and hopefully keeps improving. So for us it was important to welcome everyone as they were coming. Some were very, very scary, and meeting those parts or inside us was very overwhelming. I feel like now looking back, we were in shock for quite a few years. I think there were no feelings at the beginning. Luckily, I don't think there's no way I could have dealt with the feelings at the same time as the memories came up. And yeah, I think being in shock was good in a way, because otherwise it would have broken us. And we lost quite a few hosts, or whatever you want to call them, on the way, as we started to integrate more and more of our story. So we are co-conscious. So once a part comes up and tells something, everyone, we know it, we are aware of it, we don't forget it. And that was really hard because, well, you know, we were never supposed to remember any of this. And there's a really good reason why we're polyfragmented and having like lots and lots of subsystems, because it's too much, you know, like you can't really hold this all. So being in shock, I think, was a really good protection. And then as we worked through the layers, eventually the feelings came as well. And that was a hard year when the feelings really hit us. The grief was very, very intense. But a lot of the time, working with the body really has helped us to make our way through that. And now I would say we have a pretty good idea of our story. We've broken probably most of our programming. Having said that, we're also very aware that there will probably be booby traps somewhere in here and just waiting for the right circumstances to kick off. But when that happens, we now recognize the difference if something's a programmed part flooding us with something, or if something's something where we are going like, oh, okay, we need to do something about this. There's a danger, or we need to look at the part of our story or whatever. Yeah, so we feel we've got a quite good. We're working together quite well nowadays. So maybe one last thing to say about our journey and where we're at right now. Yeah, life is on our terms now. Yes, we get triggered, and yes, there's still stuff coming up. And yes, our normal is not what most people would consider normal. But we nowadays have a really huge toolbox, and if one thing doesn't work, something else will work. And you know, like we can go with the flow, and we're starting to reclaim our life. So a lot of things that were triggering might still be triggering in a way, but not in the same way. So we can do things now, and now, oh yeah, for some parts this is difficult because there's some memory around this, but look, we can, you know, I almost can hold my parts sort of like I've got a heart space where they can be with us and experience a safe experience in the here and now with me as a grown-up, you know, and not being hijacked and thrown back into terrific places from the past. So that is, yeah, that is like really different now. And I said it before, there's still lots to do. But what we have now is like trust and hope that it's possible. And I also know I can draw on my patience when I need to, and I'm really not a patient person. But I also know I've got the courage to face whatever comes up and the determination to just prove them all wrong. You know, like, I feel like that's the best revenge we have, is to heal, to remember. And the remembering really keeps us safe. The more I remember, the more I know about my story, the more I understand why we work in certain ways, the better I can keep myself safe. And I think that is a really good place of revenge, and that makes me so happy. Because obviously that was never meant to happen. So, coming to actually how to adapt things and how I work. So as mentioned before, I've got a quite big toolbox, and I've always adapted what I've learned straight away. You know, like, I find like some people do like lots of training before actually doing it, in applying it for themselves or with clients. We were always like, oh, that's cool, let's try that out. You know, like even many years back, when I learned Reiki, and my Reiki master said, oh, you can do this and this and this way. And I was like, oh, let's try that. So I immediately, and I've always done that. We always straight away try things out. And if we like it, we keep it. And I always say to my clients, you know, it doesn't matter what I suggest. You know, our work is about choice and empowerment. And when we connect with the body, I think it's so important to not override what's coming up. If there is a no in the body, we need to listen to that, because that's what's been taken away from us. So coming into the somatic work, we spend a lot of time on noticing, because obviously with dissociation, just noticing can be totally overwhelming. So quite often we start very slow, and people might think like we're not doing very much, but it is still very powerful stuff to even just for a few seconds to notice what's going on, or to even just connect with a part of your body, being it the foot or the hand or something that feels safe enough, possibly. But also always having in mind that we might need to adjust things, that we might go slower or faster or in a totally different direction. So what I like about my toolbox is, like, I'm not very good in following rules, but it is like, so I work quite intuitively. So if people say like, how do you work? What to expect? And I say, I can't actually give you an answer to that, because it depends on where you are and what you and your system need. And I work with like non-DID people as well, obviously. So it is about figuring out what's needed first in order to build a relationship between the two of us, or, you know, if you're a system, obviously with everyone in mind. And that can take a lot of time before we actually start doing more, you know, somatic work. So what we found with a lot of the modalities that we have trained in is that they are really not geared for dissociation or trauma. And they really need to be adjusted, especially when working with dissociative disorders. I always say, like, all parts are welcome. So we might start here with an idea of what we're doing, and before we know it, someone else comes in, and then we need to listen in. Why do they come in? You know, like, it's a bit of patchwork, really. And generally I say less is more. So if we have a lot of trauma, we will have quite fragile nervous systems. And if we don't feel safe and our nervous system gets triggered off into alarm, you know, we will switch. There will be disruption, sabotaging, and all that for very, very, very good reasons. And I think it's really important to acknowledge all of those, because we can't go ahead with brain spotting or something like that if parts are absolutely terrified of how are we going to keep the walls up, or, you know, what if we are totally overwhelmed, or it's just purely forbidden, or there's programming or whatever. So I think, especially in the beginning, is a slow start, although some people jump right in. So if any parts get triggered out, we need to look at why that is and what they need, what makes them feel safer, what is their role and why do they have it. So it's a mix of like talking, therapies, exploring the system, and bringing it back to the body, because in the end we all share the same body. And I know a lot of people go like, no, don't want to think about that, but we do have this body, like we couldn't exist without the body. So, and sometimes I think like the body is like a part as well, and it should be treated well and be welcomed as any other part. So what is actually in my toolbox? As I say, I started off as a holistic therapist, Reiki master, yoga teacher, but I don't really do much of that at all. I mean, occasionally there might be yoga posture or something, but it's not, I rarely do yoga or yoga therapy with anyone. I am an RMT consultant, or RMTI consultant, that is Rhythmic Movement Training International, and it works with retained reflexes. So in the very, very early bit of your life, from womb up to 4 years, there's a lot of reflexes that come online, and there's less of like a conscious decision to move the body. And the more we grow, the more these reflexes get integrated, but they never quite totally disappear. So they lie in the hind brain and lie dormant there until they might get triggered out. So like trauma can be the reason that these reflexes are activated again. Neurodivergency, they quite often, the brains can be quite similar to a trauma brain, where these reflexes are very, very active. And I find the RMT work has to be really broken down in tiny, tiny pieces. It can very easily be very overwhelming for a fragile nervous system, as it would be if you have DID. And again, everyone is different. So for some people it might really work big time. I mean, we did the training. I don't know how we went through but that was before we were aware. So we went through the training, and now I would really struggle to do it. Because on the training course you get a lot of you train and do the different practices on each other, and I would have really struggled with that now. What I do still do is like, when I can, I do really tiny, tiny bits. And I think with RMT, what I focus on the most is the FPR, which is the fear paralysis reflex, and the Moro, which is the fight or flight reflex. And the FPR is the freeze. Because obviously we will find those a lot in people with DID. But again, I think we need to be really aware that it can be very overwhelming for the system, and that other parts might jump in really quickly when we do something. So the pace of how I work with everyone really varies, and it can be that we have times where we work a little bit faster, and then we really need to slow down and stabilize, and then we might work a little bit faster again. Or with different parts, it's really slow. It's more like a holding and regulation and working on safety cues and stuff like that. And with other parts, it's processing. It's like, okay, here's my story. Deal with it, hold it, like it needs to be known and it needs to be rewritten. And we do that. Yeah, so the RMT is like not such a big part of my work, but it's in the background, and if there is an opportunity to do some of it, I will throw it in. What I really, really love is brain spotting. We love the training. We love to do the self-spotting, so you can do it on your own, and it's been a total game changer for us. So brain spotting is, and I'm not going to go into the academics of it because you can read it up, but I feel like to translate it for DID, you can't really find that online so much. So the way I explain it for systems is like, when there's a trauma, it creates a knot in your brain, like in the limbic system. And it's like a bit of yarn, and it's totally messed up. You don't even know where the beginning is of that big knot. And sometimes you find the beginning, and then there's another knot, and yet you need to work on that little knot. And then all of a sudden that knot unravels, and you get a big piece. And then there's another, you can't even see where it goes. And I find that is a bit like how brain spotting works. So there is a link of where we look, and I do this a lot. I usually look like up, either to the left or the right, when I start thinking about what to say next. But it also works with like when we are activated, when there is when there's trauma, when we hold something. So if we talk about an experience, you might find yourself looking somewhere. And then that way we look, because the optic nerve is really close to the brain, it links to the limbic system, and it bypasses the prefrontal cortex. So now I do actually go a little bit into the academics. So it bypasses our thinking brain, and it goes straight to the implicit memory that we hold. So sometimes we might, with brain spotting, there might be a lot of somatic stuff coming up. Sometimes for some people it's very visual, for some people it's just emotions, for some people you dissociate because you're not quite, it's really hard to look beyond the wall, and the wall is there obviously for a good reason. So if I work with systems, I again trying to stay connected. So usually in brain spotting, the therapist stays out of it, and you let the client unravel that knot by itself. And sometimes it's really weird. You start in one point and then it jumps to something totally different, and you say, what's the connection there? It doesn't matter if you don't understand it. It is somehow linked, and all of a sudden the knot dissolves. And sometimes you need a few sessions. When it comes to systems, I find, so usually we work with a pointer, and once we found a spot, you focus on the spot. When it comes to systems, I work quite differently. So sometimes I notice that someone talks and looks, and then a different part comes and looks somewhere else. So I might just point that out to begin with, and ask if it's okay to just stay on a specific spot. So it's a lot less guided a lot of the time, until we know how the system reacts to brain spotting. Because what I absolutely don't want to do is like start somewhere and take someone too deep to places where they're not ready to go. So usually in brain spotting, I would zip it and sort of like bite my tongue and not say anything. When I work with clients who have a lot of dissociation, I do check in a lot more, and just to make sure they are still feeling safe enough to go ahead. And then sometimes, obviously, once we have established a good relationship and we are have been working for quite a while, we have a good understanding of the system, then there might be times where, I might push a bit more and go like, okay, shall we just allow what's coming up? And again, I know I use it so many times and I'm trying not to, and it just keeps coming up. It's obviously not a just. It's hard. But again, it's like, by that point, we will have done a lot of psychoeducation around the nervous system, around understanding sensations in the body that might indicate that there might be a switch coming, indicate that maybe you go out of your window of tolerance and come really into total overwhelm. And we will have tools how to bring you back. We will also know that sometimes, I think regulation is really, really brilliant if you have tools for that, especially for in-between sessions. But there's a point where it's really important not to regulate and to allow what's coming, even though it's very, very scary and overwhelming. Because it gives us an opportunity to rewrite the story. So the way I work, and then this is where maybe yoga, role play, art therapy, body dynamic, all sorts of different other things might come in, where we then go, okay, so what was the missing piece of that experience? What is like, for us, it was quite often having another nervous system that we can feel. So sometimes it would take us like a whole session to just sort of like get our finger to connect with the therapist's finger, or hold a hand. Or sometimes we would sit next to each other and just feel the shoulder or the leg or knee or whatever. So for us, it was quite often the importance of not being left alone in that darkness. But sometimes also we had to do a certain movement, like a push, or we had to get up and walk away, or, you know, there's like lots of different ways how the body needs to express and change the story the body holds. And we find it's also quite important, I find, or we find, repetition and keeping it quite simple. We always felt like it has to be super dramatic to work through things. And it was at times. It was, we stopped breathing, and, it was dramatic at times. And I think it's really difficult for therapists to witness, or can be quite overwhelming for the therapist as well. I mean, we had like non-epileptic fits and all sorts of things. But I think for the body to experience a different outcome, that you're not alone, or whatever it is that's needed, that is where we rewire the brain. It's almost like, I always say to my clients, it's like, our nervous system is like a motorway. We always walk the same ways, and it's like zoom, we zoom through, and this is how we do things. It's habit. It's conditioning in the end. And it makes us sort of feel safe, but maybe not quite as alive as we possibly could be. So, and quite often if there's trauma and things are triggering, our world shrinks. We dare to do less and less and less, especially if there's programming as well, like it's so... the world is just, life is just very, very restricted. And nothing feels safe. If you go to the park for something nice and there's a high chance you get triggered and end up and you don't know how to even get home, well, yeah, it's quite likely you don't want to go to the park anymore. And then less and less and less is possible. So with this kind of work, we feel we need to open that motorway back up. And obviously in the beginning, most motorways have like a big wall on both sides. So you can't just drive off and go to the countryside, even if it looks nice. So maybe at the beginning it's about like, just even notice the countryside. And then go like, oh, I need to remember that. Maybe next time I drive past here, I need to feel and see if there is like a turning or something. Quite often there isn't a turning in the beginning when we start this work. And it feels really quite overwhelming to come off that motorway, that safe pathway in our nervous system. So there can be a lot of activation to start with when we break through those barriers or walls or whatever you want to call them. And it can be quite a bouncy ride in the beginning. But the more you go, and maybe you need to change your car, maybe you need actually a Jeep or something that can go, just through the countryside wherever it wants. So there's a lot coming together and a lot of trial and error in the beginning. Well, throughout the whole journey, to be honest. And I think also, and I think maybe this is something for therapists as well, to say like, nothing's set in stone. When you work with systems, you have to be creative as a system you're working with. Because as systems, we survived because of creativity. We survived impossible things. So as a therapist, you have to be able to also be creative and to follow us where we go. And then we found anything's possible. So, and that is like, yeah, we found that really, it took us a long time to believe, but we found like now that is how we live, you know, like, yes, sometimes we need to wait and it's not possible yet, and maybe not possible in the way that we would want something to be, but there is a way, you know, we just need to find the right way of how can we make that possible. And if we keep repeating and repeating certain things that do break down those barriers and help us to come off that motorway, each time we do that with a positive outcome and nothing happens afterwards, we can give ourselves, our nervous system, and our system of parts a message of, look, do you remember when we tried that? We were so scared before, but then we did it, and we're still here, and actually things have changed. And I think that is like, hopefully something that you will take from this talk. Another thing we would like to pass on to both people with lived experience as well as the therapists, be prepared for backlash. You know, you might have a really good session with a breakthrough, and then afterwards someone in the system gets really, really scared and wasn't ready for that. And there will be flooding, there will be maybe more self-harm, there might be more suicidality, or whatever other issues or behaviors that already had maybe improved. And I think that is part of the journey. And yes, I wish it wasn't, and I wish I could have a magic wand and, you know, it was like a linear journey. But yeah, that is unfortunately not the case. So, and I know from own experience how hard it is when you had a few good days and then everything breaks apart again and you fall or you have a flare. I mean, we lost our vision a few years back in one of our eyes, and that was scary as hell because there was always a possibility we could lose vision in the other eye and no one could tell us if we get the vision back. Luckily we did. But yeah, that was very scary, and that was like, I'm going to stop this work, you know, like I'm not going to do this anymore. This is like, you know, this is too much. And it was because we did things too fast in a certain area of our life, and parts got too scared, so they said, okay, stop. And now I think we still get sore eyes, and then we check in and we pace ourselves, and it's not straightforward and we get it wrong, but we also know that there's only one way, and that's forwards. You know, I'm not going to go back, you know, I'm not going to hide again or anything, you know, like I do see, or we see ourselves a bit like a phoenix, you know, like we arise, we're burning everything down and then we rise, and that's where we're at the moment. Yeah, so the next bit is a bit of like practical stuff, but we're going to move into our somatic space, so bear with us, and maybe take a moment to see if you're up for that. Maybe you just want to watch. Maybe you feel like, oh no, I really want to try it. Just a very brief little practice, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Hi everyone. Yeah, so this is my little space where I work from with my in-person clients, and sometimes I'm here for online clients as well. Sometimes I'm at home. Yeah, so we're coming into the practice bit now. And there's, as I said before, there's always choice. So maybe take a moment, and I'll give you some time, we're not going to start straight away, to just check in with everyone. Do you want to participate? Is everyone on board with that? Do you maybe just want to watch? Maybe you want to switch off for a bit and come back for the Q&A. Maybe there's only certain parts who would like to join in and try this out, while others are in hiding play or in safe places, playgrounds, or whatever you have in your inner world. And obviously, you can just start and then stop. You could, it's going to be it's obviously a recording, and it will be out later on and available, so you can come back to it when you are in a different place where it feels easier to try this out. And it's a really brief practice. It's not relaxation, it's not mindfulness, it's about connecting and exploring how that connection feels with the body. There's a few practices that can help to be more present. It might not be the right thing to be present, because I think sometimes we always say dissociation is bad, and we need to regulate and all that. Sometimes it's really good not to be present. Sometimes we just need to be able to leave the body and not be in the body, in order to get through the next bit, or things might be too intense and we need to stay in the inner world for safety. So yeah, just take a moment and see what feels right for you. And then it doesn't matter if you're sitting, lying down, if you're standing, if you're moving around, it doesn't have to be stillness, but I'd like you to check in with your actual body, with how does it feel right now. Obviously you've had already maybe quite a few presentations today, so there might be some activation, there might be a bit of quite a lot of things going on, you might be very tired. Whatever there is, just notice it, acknowledge it, and it's not about changing it or making it something different or judging it. It's really just going oh hi, yeah, okay, I acknowledge you're here, and whatever that is. So if that is easier while you're moving, then keep moving. If it's easier while you're lying down and closing your eyes, do that. Just find a way of connecting with everyone and see what you need right now. And I know that's not as straightforward. Sometimes there are very different opinions inside of what we need. But see, maybe you can come to a compromise together that works for now. And then if it feels okay, one of the practices I'd like to share, because I find that really, really helpful, and I've had really good feedback from other people, is working with our skin boundaries. So our skin boundaries are the closest boundaries we have to the outside world. And it helps us to be present. And as I said, sometimes that's not the right thing, so just see if this feels okay. There's different ways of doing it. So one is just sort of giving yourself gentle squeezes. And you can do this sitting, lying down, standing. It's almost I'm here, or we're here, depending on, sometimes there's different parts in different areas of your body. It's like a welcoming. I exist, or we exist. And maybe you stay with the squeezing for a bit. Maybe it feels better to tap, and that can be quite fast. It can be with fists, or it can be slower. See what rhythm works for you. Maybe you just need to be held. Sort of one breath at a time. So see, have a little play around which one feels right. And maybe there's different areas that need different things right now. And if you're watching, there's lots of mirror neurons. So even if you're not actually doing the actual practice, your body, your nervous system, and all your insiders will still get something out of it. And then if you can, the next bit is standing up. So just maybe see if there's anything that needs to be shaken out. Then just bring your awareness to your feet. So spread those toes out nice and wide. And if it feels okay, sort of start gently swinging. It's not a big movement. It's really gentle, so we're not lifting the heels, we're not coming up with the toes. It's more like a gentle arriving in the here and now. Again, this is me or this is us. We're here in this body right now. And we all share this body. If we want to. And maybe forwards, backwards doesn't feel right. Maybe you want to go from side to side. It's okay. Maybe you want to just do something totally different. So when I'm teaching in my class, what I offer is just an offer and is an invitation. If it doesn't feel right for you, you might want to do something different. And then maybe if it feels okay, sort of like arriving into this here and now, having a little play of like how far forward can you go without stepping, without making a step. And while we do this, maybe think about something, it could be anything, that you would like to invite into your life, that you would like to step into. It could be that you want a certain part to step into the body. It could be a decision you have to make. It could be just claiming life, just stepping into a yes to life. And I know that is not always as straightforward. I already have parts going, no, I'm not going to do that. So acknowledge them as well and say, maybe we can just see this as a playful exercise, just to see how it feels. And then once you've visualized or thought, because I know some people find it difficult to visualize, if you've thought of something, then maybe lean forward and then come into a step. And maybe go back. Sometimes it's good to allow us the option of stepping into something, but also coming back, pausing a bit, checking out if it feels safe enough. Maybe it's really scary to do and you're not quite ready. And then you could step back and go okay, there was a lot, maybe do a bit more shaking there, maybe do a bit of holding, just noticing, squeezing, tapping. And maybe this is enough. Maybe this is it for now. Maybe you can start again. Maybe stepping forward with the other foot. It might be about feeling very different on the other side. And then slowly, when you're ready, stepping into the other foot. And coming in and out. This activates certain muscles that help with bringing awareness on experience into the body of my role in the world, my own inner support system. I've got this. My resources that I have inside. Because quite often we think, or we are viewed maybe as broken, and yes, we certainly have, to deal with a lot. But having a system is also a resource. So maybe we could step into that as well, into that resource of having a system, having different parts who can step in when needed, or if needed, or if wanted. And I know if you're earlier on in your journey, that might be really something where you feel like, whoa, can't see that happening. It does eventually. And then just stepping back again. See what you need. Maybe you just need to stretch or whatever you need to do. And we're coming to an end with this now, because this is really just a brief little taster. So do whatever you need after I've switched this off. There will be a Q&A where you can come with all your questions. And I'm just going to switch this off here now, and I'll see you hopefully in the Q&A. Thank you. Bye.